Back in 1973, a spacecraft named Pioneer 11 launched into space on a mission to explore the asteroid belt and the solar system's largest planets, the mighty gas giants. Traveling at 32,000 miles per hour, which is 51,500 kilometers per hour, Pioneer 11 sped away from Earth on a journey that would ultimately help pave the way for the future Voyager probes. Although this mission was an incredible success story in the end, it wasn't without its problems. Plagued with a number of malfunctions, Pioneer 11 has sometimes been referred to as the luckiest spacecraft ever launched. Mainly because it narrowly avoided a devastating collision with a moon that at the time was unknown. So how close did the lucky spacecraft come to being obliterated? This is the true story of the time NASA nearly crashed into an unknown object in the outer solar system. Pioneer 11 was the sister spacecraft to Pioneer 10 that launched the year before it. Both were designed and managed as pathfinders for the future Voyager probes to ensure that they could travel through the asteroid belt and survive Jupiter's immense radiation environment. When it came to space missions such as this one, building two identical spacecraft was normally a good idea, as the possibility that one might fail seemed high. After all, no spacecraft had ever ventured through the asteroid belt, which is a donut-shaped region just beyond Mars that contains asteroids ranging in size from dust particles to rock chunks as big as Alaska. Although there was no significant chance of hitting anything large, hitting a few hundred grains of asteroid would be just as bad. As originally conceived, Pioneer 11 was intended as a backup to Pioneer 10. However, by the time the second spacecraft launched, the first had already safely passed through the asteroid belt, becoming the first to do so, and was well on its way to its encounter with Jupiter. Pioneer 10 was the first spacecraft to visit Jupiter, successfully completing its observations while plunging deep into the mighty gas giant's powerful radiation belts. And as it turns out, they were every bit as strong as expected. After a 92-minute round trip, electronic systems functioned erratically, resulting in some major data losses. But Pioneer 10 did manage to emerge intact, although battered and singed. During its flyby of Jupiter, Pioneer 10 obtained the first close-up images of the planet, charted its intense radiation belts, located the planet's magnetic field, and discovered that Jupiter is predominantly a liquid planet. As the primary mission had been a success, mission planners placed its sister craft, Pioneer 11, on a different trajectory, one that would take advantage of Jupiter's massive gravitational field, slingshotting it back across the solar system so that it could also encounter Saturn. In December 1974, while using the gas giant for a gravity assist, Pioneer 11 captured the most detailed images of the Great Red Spot ever seen, as these dramatic images reveal. At its closest point to Jupiter, Pioneer 11 was travelling faster than any human-made object at the time, more than 106,000 miles per hour, which is more than 171,000 kilometers per hour. Although on a different path, in the end, Pioneer 11's experience at Jupiter was much like Pioneer 10's, with erratic electronic behaviour but no permanent damage. And so while still in communication with Earth, the hardy spacecraft was on its way to the ringed world, Saturn, but it certainly wasn't out of the woods yet. Since it launched, Pioneer 11 endured a number of malfunctions, including the momentary failure of one of its power supplies, called the RTG boom. A problem with an attitude control thruster which controls the orientation of the spacecraft, and a partial failure of the asteroid dust detector, which analysed dust particles. But regardless of these malfunctions, it had successfully traversed the asteroid belt and survived the bombardment of Jupiter's immense radiation. Then, in late July 1979, nearly 5 years later, Pioneer 11 began its first observations of Saturn. But by that time, the famous Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 had already been launched, had completed their flybys of Jupiter, and were on their way to Saturn as well, taking advantage of a rare planetary alignment of the outer planets that happens once every 175 years, reducing their journey time between planets. Based on this, NASA decided to place Pioneer 11 on a path that would provide maximum support for Voyager 2, which would eventually use Saturn for a gravity assist so that it could later visit Uranus and Neptune, completing the Voyager Grand Tour of the solar system. However, although this planned trajectory seemed like the safest and most worthwhile in aiding Voyager 2, it almost caused an unexpected end to Pioneer 11's already perilous journey, as the spacecraft nearly collided with an unknown object. Without warning, on September 1st, 1979, Pioneer 11 suddenly began detecting something very large and unknown in front of it for around 8 seconds, and its magnetometer recorded a major disturbance in Saturn's magnetic field. It then became clear that the spacecraft had pierced through the magnetic wake of a previously undiscovered moon roughly 125 miles wide, which is 200 kilometers wide. It passed the mysterious undiscovered moon at a distance of no more than a few hundred miles, the closest it had come to anything since leaving Earth. Soon after the near collision, the moon was tentatively identified as Epimetheus, an object discovered to have been captured by Pioneer's imaging the previous day. However, after both the Voyager spacecraft passed Saturn, it was found that there are actually 2 similar-sized moons in the same orbit. The suspect, Epimetheus, but also the moon, Janus, causing some uncertainty about which one was the object that Pioneer 11 nearly collided with. To add a little bit more confusion, both the moons exchange a little momentum as they get closer to each other, causing them to trade orbits once every 4 years, meaning the inner moon becomes the outer and the outer moon becomes the inner, creating a bizarre orbital dance unlike any other in the solar system. After the near miss, Pioneer 11 passed within just 13,000 miles of Saturn's cloud tops, which is only 21,000 kilometers. During the encounter, it sent back groundbreaking data on the planet, its rings, and many of its satellites, including 440 incredible images. Data that would have never been collected if it had been on a slightly different trajectory or arrived at Saturn slightly earlier. Although the achievements of both the Pioneer spacecraft were somewhat eclipsed later by the far greater Voyager probes, they were true to their name. They were pioneers when it came to the exploration of the asteroid belt and the gas giant planets. After leaving Saturn, Pioneer 11 continued outwards in the general direction of Sagittarius, towards the center of the galaxy. Eventually, it passed the orbit of Neptune in February 1990, beginning its long journey into interstellar space, and becoming one of only a handful of spacecraft to do so. The so-called Lucky spacecraft, which narrowly missed an undiscovered moon and that was only planned to operate for 21 months, ended up functioning in some way or another for more than 22 years. An incredible feat of human engineering. After one of the most exciting journeys made by any spacecraft, Pioneer 11's final signal was received in September 1995, when it was more than 4 billion miles away from Earth, which is 6.4 billion kilometers from Earth. Now it is a dormant relic, floating through the darkness of space, serving only as a reminder of a once great mission that revealed so much about our fascinating solar system.